Hello, my name is Heather Smith, and you're listening to the Accounting Apps podcast. Today, our guest is a dynamic sales and marketing leader who excels in helping venture-funded software companies build robust sales and marketing functions. With a specialised focus on the accounting and fintech verticals, he's a proven track record of establishing brands and expanding customer bases across North America, EMEA, and Asia Pacific regions. He has successfully collaborated with both small and large teams across various time zones, driving impressive growth in scale-up companies, achieving 70% growth year on year. He is the co-host of the podcast Strategy and the Virtual Controller. So I'll say that again so you can go and subscribe to it and pause, subscribe, and then come back. Strategy and the Virtual Controller with Penny Breslin. He worked at Ignition when it was called Practice Ignition and Dext when it was called Receipt Bank. And now he is the head of marketing, accountant and advisor group at Intuit Australia. Please welcome Damien Greathead.
Heather, thank you so much. And also thank you to Gen AI who helped me with that introduction. So I greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me, Heather.
It's wonderful to finally have you on the show. I think we've known each other for, close to maybe 7 or 8 years. But
yeah, absolutely. I think it was either a XeroCon in Brisbane or potentially a QuickBooks Connect where we met for the first time. So yes, it's been a long friendship.
Wow. You've brought up QuickBooks Connect already. Today is actually 5 years to the day that we had QuickBooks Connect in Australia, down in Melbourne. So they had me speaking on niching at that conference. But I thought you actually were in America for that particular one, the Melbourne one. Maybe were you in the Melbourne one or the Sydney one?
No, I was in the Sydney one. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, my memory was correct. I think you were in America with Receipt Bank or Dext.
With Receipt Bank at the time. Yeah, that's right.
Oh, sounds like I've been stalking you. All of your movements, Damien. I'm tracking you like those people track the Elon Musk
I think
plane.
Impressive memory is in terms of QuickBooks Connect Melbourne, who were the people that I met, and Damien wasn't one of them. So I think that's an impressive memory, Heather.
And you know what I do is I take photos of every single person I meet because so I can reflect back on who it was, what was the story, what do
smart.
I need to know? Yeah, so I'm more. But I'm going off topic. I dyed my hair. I had a horrible hair dye incident for that conference. So it is a very memorable photo.
Right.
So before we go too far, or let me pull back. How are you, Damien? What have you been up to?
Yeah, Heather, I'm very well, thank you. Loving life in Sydney. You can see the Sydney Harbour Bridge behind me there. Moved back from the United States after 15, 16 years there, and moved on April 1st, 2020. So if you can cast your memory back, that was sort of when the first hotel quarantine was happening. So we landed in Sydney. We got shipped straight to a hotel where we stayed for 2 weeks. And it was at the start of that whole COVID period, start of hotel quarantine. Nobody really knew what was going on. But 4 years later, loving the return to Australia. My wife, she's American. She's thoroughly enjoying Sydney. We've got 2 young boys. So life is good. And now have found a great place at Intuit, helping spread the good word of QuickBooks amongst Australian accountants and bookkeepers. So I'm very grateful for where I landed, and also grateful for my journey. For listeners, I don't think by design, have ended up in the accountants channel since I left university, working with a guy called Rick Payne and learning an enormous amount from him out of Brisbane, actually, in a Principal office. Then even working in an accounting firm in California to realize that I was a terrible accountant, but loved the technology side of things. So then went on to consulting, consulted to Xero, consulted to QuickBooks, consulted to Receipt Bank, and then opened up that US receipt bank office. So, as I said, not by design, but my whole career has been in the accounting industry profession and have thoroughly enjoyed it. The tech side, the client services side, the consulting side. So yeah, it's been a wonderful journey so far, and meeting wonderful people along the way who become long-term friends and familiar faces and great professional connections.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you for that background. And for those who are listening in, Damien's sitting in an orange office, so I'm getting a receipt bank flash.
I know there's a bit of PTSD for me as well, so I got a great view to make up for it.
So you look, one of the things about you, Damien, is you have really truly been quite globally. And one of the reasons I went into accounting was at the age of 14. I could see this was a global profession. And you've possibly been smarter in that you completely didn't do the tax side of it, I'm assuming. And you've just sort of embraced the accounting technology and the marketing side of it, and really been able to bounce around globally. So you're sitting in Sydney, you've worked all over the world. Where do you truly call home?
I think if you asked me that question, Heather, 2 years ago, it probably would have been the US. It probably would have been Washington, DC, where I met my wife, and we started we started our small family, just the two of us. And then obviously we've grown that family. So I probably would have said Washington, DC. Whereas I think in the subsequent 2 years, I think Sydney is really our home. And as we're in the Northern Beaches, I think it's a beautiful part of the world, and we're incredibly fortunate. And also to see how my wife is absolutely loving it, and to see how our boys are thriving in it. We're now looking at high schools and whatnot for the boys, whereas I think I originally envisioned sort of a 3 to 5 year stint in Australia and then make our way back to the United States. But now I'm delighted to say, yeah, we're looking at high schools and whatnot, and really calling Sydney home. So I've thoroughly enjoyed my return to Sydney.
Awesome. It's always been interesting hearing you and sort of the words that you use, knowing that you did degrees in Brisbane. But then I was listening to on a podcast, and you're like going, it's 80 in Sydney. And I'm like, oh.
I know the podcast strategy and the virtual controller, my co-host Penny Breslin, she's sitting in San Diego. So we've got both sides of the Pacific listening. So we've got to make sure that we're talking in multiple measurement systems throughout the day. So we go between Celsius and Fahrenheit, pounds and kilos, miles and kilometers. And so, yeah, I think for those people playing along at home, sometimes can get a little bit confused.
Yes, absolutely. Now you have touched on it, but could you please deep dive a bit more to tell us your story, to tell us your journey in the SaaS sales and marketing world, sort of within that accounting fintech sector? Could you take us through that a little bit deeper?
Yeah, for sure. I think it first started when I was actually working in an accounting firm in California, and I did a small apprenticeship in US tax, Heather, and yeah, not a very good experience. I think the partners in the firm recognized that I wasn't a great accountant, but I'm not sure if they felt sad for me, or if I think they saw the way that I was embracing technology. So in the firm, it was very paper heavy. It was very manual. And this was a good sort of 15, 20 years ago now. And so it was sort of at the start of that first OCR technology. Xero had come into the marketplace. QuickBooks Online was there as well. And what we were trying to do is recognize that if we wanted to talk to our clients about technology and about modernizing, then we had to walk the talk as well. So I quickly put my hand up to move away off US and California tax code and move on to technology and client services. And so then I focused on workflow and tech, and moving what we could into the cloud, moving what clients we could into the cloud. We were a big QuickBooks desktop firm. and what we realized is not all firms were ready for zero, not all clients were ready for zero, but we handpicked a few. We put a couple of our entities on Zero and QuickBooks Online so that we could test it ourselves. We were, I think it was some of the first users of Receipt Bank, which is how we got introduced to Receipt Bank. And again, it was more so that we wanted to be out front, and making the mistakes so that our clients didn't have to. So that's where I really got excited about what technology can do in an accounting firm and what technology can do in a small business, which was what our clients. And then I love the relationship of either working with our firm and going through that change management process, or the change management process with our clients. And even the early days of Receipt Bank, and sitting with in this point, sitting with clients to say, just take photos of your receipts and take photos of your documents and that type of stuff. And that was a completely foreign idea to them, but they could all show me pictures of their grandkids and all show me pictures of their kids and family and holiday and all that type of stuff. And once we started that conversation, the documents started coming in. And the documents started coming in, and the clients started to love it. And so there was a real light bulb moment for me to be like, oh, okay, this is where the opportunity is. So rather than just in the firm, and that coincided quite serendipitously, I guess, when Receipt Bank were looking to open their US office. They had offices in the UK, offices in Sydney. And so I was fortunate enough to opened the US office out of Washington, D.C., and a small office of three of us, and built it to about 20 before I sort of started to go more global in my role. And the US is a really interesting place, very different to Australia. In addition to the US tax code, you've then got 50 state tax codes. So it's and you've got to file your federal return, your state return, potentially your local area, so your county return as well. So it's a very complicated compliance area, and can be very laborsome. A lot of data entry, a lot of paperwork, and even some states, I think it's all changed now, but they would still only allow you to file by paper. And actually dealing with the Californian EDD, which is the payroll tax, et cetera, you can still only send stuff to them by fax machine. So there's still a lot of legacy systems depending on the state, the county that you're operating in. So it was a really fascinating operating environment. And because they don't have a GST VAT, we had to come up with very different ways to emphasize the role of Receipt Bank and importance of Receipt Bank in that cloud ecosystem. So it was just sort of there was a lot of testing, a lot of experimenting. What is the message? Because the GST VAT message out of the UK and Australia and Canada, that resonated for Receipt Bank, but not necessarily for the US, where they don't have that same sales. They've got a different sales tax system, much more convoluted and much more complicated, but Receipt Bank didn't have the same value proposition. So we had to test and iterate on how we appealed to US accountants and bookkeepers.
That is fascinating. And as listeners know, I failed tax multiple times, and that's why I do tax. And that's why I sit in the sort of the management accounting technology space. And I think that if you sit in that space, as you said, the tax really restricts where you can operate, and you need to know so much, and you need to keep keeping up to date. And if it suits your mind, that's great. But the technology is actually quite liberating, isn't it? And it does enable you to do these exciting things. And it is fascinating how different countries and different states evolve. And to that question, you've worked in a lot of jurisdictions, and now you're sitting in Australia. Do you see anything that people are doing overseas that we should be doing in Australia that has evolved better than it did in Australia?
I think what's happened in the US, and you'll be able to sort of challenge me on this, is, and this was also a part of the receipt bank value proposition in the United States. It didn't have that same, it didn't resonate as strongly as it did in the GST, VAT type environments. So we had to really double down on management accounting and client accounting for accounting firms. And this was a big shift for accounting firms because accounting firms typically 10 years prior had sort of said, you know what, that's manual. We can't do it cost effectively for our clients. So we're going to say no to that work. And what we had to do is we had to build a use case and a case study and a value proposition that sat around accounting firms to say, actually, I know you want to get into this big word of advisory services, and that's the buzzword of advisory services, and everyone wants to go into advisory services. But what we realized is you can't do advisory services without good quality numbers, and you can't do advisory services once or twice a year. So we actually worked quite closely with a lot of firms, small and large, to help them build up that client accounting services bookkeeping capability so that they could then get good books for their clients, and then from good numbers, actually have really meaningful conversations about ways to grow. And so to answer your question, I think in the United States, bookkeeping or client accounting services, whatever you want to call it, is the fastest growing revenue line in the top 100 accounting firms, and actually within accounting firms generally, which I think blows my mind, because typically it was always tax. It was always tax and audit to an extent as well, and then consulting, which was one-off projects. But what we're seeing is those firms that have really got their tech stack working for them, got their industry vertical working for them, that is just growing faster than any other service line. And the ability, the recurring revenue that comes from that is outstanding. But actually the value add opportunities that come from, I'm doing your books on a regular basis, I can see the numbers, we've got confidence in the numbers, here's the story that the numbers are telling us. So I think in the United States, I think interestingly, they're a little bit behind on the cloud adoption journey, but I think they're further along the understanding the role and the opportunity of bookkeeping in their firm. I don't know. That's my take on it. I think in Australia there's still a lot of accounting firms. There's accounting firms and there's bookkeeping firms. Whereas in the United States, I think it's blurred a little bit more closely. Blurred a little bit more.
Absolutely, and I think they have less onus on who can call themselves a bookkeeper, whereas here in Australia, there's a lot of regulations around that. And thus, when the Tax Practitioner Board introduced the BAS agent regime, there was a lot of speculation that bookkeepers and BAS agent practices would almost cease to exist because there was so much regulation on them, and it would just be easier for them to join an accounting practice, which is not a requirement in the US. So, yeah, look, very, very interesting observations there. And also what I was hearing there, and this has been a really interesting strategy of SaaS businesses, is they truly partner and they coach businesses in how to actually operate and coach practices in how to actually operate. And I know initially, and I know there was a lot of people out there who said, stop telling us what to do. But then I had this really interesting conversation with David Boyer, who is CEO of Change GPS, but came through as a management accountant. And he was like, we have so much great data in Change GPS, because he joined that company from being outside as an accountant. We have so much great data. We can tell them what to do because we know what works and what doesn't work. And that's the same sort of story that I'm hearing from you. And it is I think I've had a mind change on that. It does make sense for businesses to give guidance in how you should actually operate because you've got the data.
I think the data is there, and Just as soon as you said data, I came back with data. I think some of those words are just embedded in me now, but I do vacillate between data and data. But I think you're right. And I think also there's enough use case and case studies whereas I think in the early days, and I remember on my receipt bank soapbox telling accounting firms that they need to do this, that, and the other. But then when I was able to turn around and say them, those firms that those firms that have not received information from their clients within 5 days, that if you don't get them within 5 days, you're not going to get them, and they're going to be troublesome the entire time. So as we started to look at what the data was able to tell us and bring out those very specific nuggets, if you will, that's when we started, I think, to get a lot more credibility about how the technology actually plays. And when we started to see the client to accountant or client to bookkeeper ratio starting to significantly change. Well, again, we had data that allowed us to I guess validate what we'd been talking about, and then the use cases as well to support that. But you're absolutely right. Whether it's the sort of technology firms working with accounting firms to help them enable the technology that they've purchased, or alternatively accounting firms talking to their clients about what's happening in the business, about the numbers. There's such a great synergy and partnership that I think can be further explored and can be further embedded, whether it's software and the accounting firm and client. There's a real opportunity there to get more out of that relationship.
Absolutely. And I think it's, as you said, move off the soapbox and tell the story.
Yeah.
And it is exactly that. And sort of you've come on that journey, and other people tell the story. Share the good case studies. They resonate with the community. For the soapbox, it is what it is. It is the soapbox, and the stories do resonate. So for the apps and other businesses who are running and trying to sell into the community, please embrace that sort of line. So Damien, can you share what you're now doing at Intuit Australia?
Yeah, absolutely, Heather. So I lead the advisor marketing team. So my responsibility is to educate and promote QuickBooks to accountants and bookkeepers, so that they better understand the value of the tools that we're building, so that they use it in their own practice and enjoy those benefits, and then talk about it confidently to their clients. So first and foremost, it's about educating accountants and bookkeepers about all the goodness that is within the QuickBooks suite. And I think there's a lot of I think people would be pleasantly surprised by the feature set that we've built over the last couple of years. And so once educate, train, because I know that's an important part of it. Accountants and bookkeepers need to know how the tools work, what are the bells and whistles, and then give them the confidence and the material so that they can go out and talk confidently to their clients. If clients or prospective clients come in asking about it, they can also speak confidently about it. So yeah, I'm leading a team of about 8 marketers here. We've got about 250 people in the Australian office here, so we're growing it, and I think it's actually a really exciting time for QuickBooks, particularly from the product perspective. I would say that there was a bit of a dearth. Is that the right word? Of product development in the Australian market for some time. Whereas I think in the last 18 months, 2 years, I'm coming up on 3 years now, that the updates and actually new products are quite outstanding. So I'm actually really proud to help spread the QuickBook message to Australian bookkeepers and accountants who I think know of QuickBooks, but probably don't know the depth and breadth of what we can do to help firms.
Well, I know that when I went to the roadshow, which was a year ago, Megan Wood did a really good job of showcasing some new features and functionalities released. And then for an article I was writing, I dropped in last week and was reviewing feature and functionality release. and there was a lot of good stuff there. So I was really impressed. And it's interesting because people are kind of going, oh, is there a focus on the US now? Are we not getting stuff happening here in Australia? And what is happening with the other solutions? Are they putting the features and functionalities out there? But you've definitely pulled forward and are throwing a lot of features and functionalities and training across Australia in the Intuit world. Now, can you share with us details of a few of these that you feel the accounting and bookkeeping community are talking about and are loving?
First one is QuickBooks Tax. A lot of people don't even know that we have a tax product. So let me talk about QuickBooks Tax very quickly. It's in partnership with Logit. So it's QuickBooks Tax powered by Logit. And that has a deep integration between QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Tax, powered by Logit. So, the great thing about that as well is, even if your clients are on MyOb and Xero, you can still send it into Logit. You can still send it into QuickBooks Tax. So a lot of our pro advisors, BAS agents and accountants are using QuickBooks for their QuickBooks clients. They might have some clients on Xero. They might have some clients on MyOb. But the really great thing, excuse me, is that they can use one tax product for everything, and it integrates seamlessly. So I know with some of the other products, if you're sort of going, you would need to key data, or you need to download and upload CSV files, etc. QuickBooks Tax powered by Logit allows that deep integration from QuickBooks, but also from Xero and MyOb. So you've got now one tax solution, which I think is really good. I was talking to a firm, Spire Corp. They're up in, I think, Nerang on the Gold Coast, and they were talking about the e-signatures, the two-factor authentication, the security, and the client experience that's happening as a result of QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Tax, which I think I knew about them, but the way that they raved about them, I thought is definitely worthwhile of a share. So I think QuickBooks Tax for BAS and year-end compliance, definitely worth checking out. The other one that I would talk about is QuickBooks Online Advanced. So QuickBooks Online, the product up until November last year, there were 3 different versions of that: Simple Start, Essentials, and Plus, and different functionality, different user limits, different things like that. But we introduced QuickBooks Online Advanced into Australia. That comes with 25 users, comes up with backup and restore capability, custom fields, custom roles, employee expenses, management reporting. Obviously, there's the templates there, but you can build anything that you need to. It's got its own performance center, spend management, revenue recognition. I think we just released the asset register as well. So this is a much more robust program for the top end of the SMB world. And so I think a lot of listeners wouldn't realize that we have, first and foremost, 3 levels within the QuickBooks Online family, but then we also have QuickBooks Online Advanced. And you can go to the website and see the recommended retail price for that, $110 for those 25 users.
Oh, but don't we have a price increase coming up?
Not on advanced, but yeah, a price increase is coming up on some of our products, including payroll. But at Pro Advisors, they get 50% off. So their wholesale discount is 50% off, regardless of tier. So I think that's there are some price increases coming, but I think for the Pro Advisor discount, that means that its payroll is going up 50 cents.
You don't need to go through the prices.
Yeah. But most importantly, it's the 50% discount for Pro Advisors is where you can deliver real value to your clients and to your own firm. So I think folks would be pleasantly surprised about the functionality across the different SKUs, as we call them, or the different QuickBooks products that we have available.
And I'll mention something, and I'm not sure I've got the right name here, but a little while ago, I think it was 2 years ago, QuickBooks acquired DataDear, which is a company that I was working with from Malta, and that solution, which was a syncing solution, and that is surfacing, I think, as Smart Sync.
Is it syncing to where?
It syncs your QuickBooks data to spreadsheets.
Oh,
And
yes.
so
Yeah. Yep. Smart Sync.
Smart
Yeah.
Sync. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. There you go.
I was like syncing
So that's a
because
great
there's
solution.
yeah, absolutely. Great, and that's within QuickBooks Online Advanced. And yeah, I think that was released to Australia this month. So I think the other thing is just that the rate of certainly within Intuit, there's been a shift in the mindset of this build global, delight local. And so what we're starting to see
Ooh,
is
I
a
like
lot
that.
more a lot more previously I think there was a lot of stuff developed for the United States, whereas recognizing that the United States is quite a different compliance ecosystem, expanding that mindset to think, how do we design globally and then delight locally with the local compliance regulations. And I think that's it's not that we've got a team of Australian engineers and product managers delivering all of this goodness. We're working with teams in the UK, in Israel, in India, in the US, the engineers working asynchronously across these projects and being able to rapidly localize them has been, I think, one of the reasons why we've been able to bring so much goodness in terms of feature updates and new products to the QuickBooks lineup.
As a Australian sitting here on the podcast, I think all the solutions should release everything into Australia and New Zealand first, because we're small, we're simple. Test it out for you, and then you can let other people use it.
I know, and unfortunately with Advanced, it went the other way. It started in the most complex, the US, then to Canada, then the UK, and now to Australia. But what we are seeing, though, is very much we did our first global release in terms of our modern reports, where it impacted a certain part of the reporting capability across all platforms. I don't think it went as well as we'd hoped. So there's sort of a lot of learnings a part of that. But that allows us, that type of mentality allows us to bring things to market much more quickly, which I think is really exciting as well.
Yeah. But I do think starting it in a small infrastructure,
Yes, yeah.
in a small, treat us as the petri dish to test things in. We can give the strategy advice back to people
and you give
higher up the chain than us.
And give us very candid feedback, which we do get regularly. So I appreciate that. Absolutely.
So talking about all of these features and functionalities, and we have briefly talked about QuickBooks Connect. What is Intuit Australia's conference and roadshow outlook for 2024 and 2025?
Well, we've got a busy schedule, Heather. We've in the last 12 months, we've been testing a lot of different formats. So we ran a Get Connected event. So it's a smaller it's smaller than that QuickBooks Connect event that you remember in Melbourne. So it's called Get Connected. It's managed locally. So we ran that in November at Allianz Stadium in Sydney, and we had about 450 advisors join us for those 2 days. So that was a great success. We also in March we ran a 15-city roadshow. So that was a full day of sort of thought leadership, product updates, day in the life. In June 2024, we do a short and sharp product showcase across 20 cities in Australia. And then I'm delighted to say we've invested heavily in virtual training, but we've also invested heavily in in-person training. So we're seeing 70, 100, 150, 200 people showing up to some of our QuickBooks Online certification sessions across the country, depending on the location. But that's a really important part of it as well, is sitting with advisors and showing them how the products work, showing them the tips and tricks as well. So we've got a full program of the big flagship events, the more local events that allow us to get out more regionally. We're also looking to spin up just our local happy hours and local coffee meetups as well, so that it'll be a real opportunity for the account managers to go out into their patches, so to speak, their neighborhoods, and sit down and meet with their customers. So rather than it being sort of just a phone relationship, get some good FaceTime with their account manager. And the account manager brings someone from customer success, brings someone from product to those different meetings, and they have more of an informal get together. So yeah, in the rest of 24 and certainly 25, a full gamut of in-person events, and obviously we have our virtual training. We've got our monthly Pro Power Hour, which is a virtual event just to keep advisors up to date on everything that's going on. And the last thing that I would mention as well, Heather, is we just launched our community platform, QuickBooks Go. So what we want to do there is we want to bring advisors together online to share insights, to deep dive into what's working, what's not, to leverage and to bring people together virtually in a much more structured environment. So hopefully that when we are face to face, those connections are much greater as well. So a lot is on the roadmap, and even if it feels like only yesterday that the Get Connected event was on at Allianz Stadium, but yeah, we've done a lot since then, getting out, taking the good word to accountants and bookkeepers across the country.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure there seems to be a bit of a vacuum for in-person events in Australia. Good for people to be aware. We just need lots of notice.
Yes. Yep. And lots of notice. Absolutely agreed. And I think also that's probably one of the challenges as well is there's a lot of email out there, etc. So how can we better communicate with advisors? Please let me know what the best way to do that is, so that we can get the good word out to you about in-person training, upcoming showcase and events and whatnot. I think I'll plug for the showcase happening in June. It's a 3-hour event, so starts at 11, finishes by 1. No, finishes by 2. Sorry,
yeah,
3 hours.
Can't finish at 1 because those people need to be fed.
No, but also by that, you could tell I was a bad accountant because my math didn't quite work. So yeah, so it's 11 till 2, across 21 cities, and it's just designed as a short, sharp session just to run accountants and bookkeepers through a whole bunch of functionality. So we've got a virtual option as well if you can't join us, but that's definitely coming up.
Fantastic. And when we here in Australia, and I'll extend it to New Zealand, are talking about QuickBooks, we're only talking about an online product. QuickBooks Desktop doesn't exist here, does it?
Correct. QuickBooks Desktop does not exist in Australia. Yeah.
I love watching the conversations in the US about QuickBooks Desktop. Evil Heather loves watching them going, oh my goodness, it's been a decade and we're still talking about desktop solution. Like we just don't, it doesn't even enter my mind until I go and watch those conversations.
And just watch from the sidelines and just see how they go. Yeah.
Yes. I apologize to anyone listening in who's offended by my comments there. It's just the way things have evolved differently. So Damien,
yeah, absolutely.
You have extensive experience in marketing in SaaS companies. What marketing advice do you have for the apps, the thousands of apps who are listening in, who want to connect with Intuit Australia, who want to connect with Intuit Australia's customer base?
I think it's about listening to customers. And this was something that we learnt at Receipt Bank from Intuit, actually, and the commitment to understanding the customer problem and solving the customer problem. Intuit does what we call workplace observations, and that was one of the things that we learnt at Receipt Bank from Intuit, where it was actually going to the office, or sharing a Zoom, watching the accountant and bookkeeper as they navigate the screen, and ask questions about why do you do it that way? Why, hang on, that's not the way that we built it. Why do you do it that way? And having that deep customer, I think first and foremost, empathy, and then that willingness to work with the customer to build the experience. I think that's one of the critical things. And I think ultimately it's get in touch. It's we've got we've got the apps.com ecosystem. So we're always looking to expand. We're looking to solve more and more problems for Australian and bookkeeping firms specifically. We've obviously got the global apps that are out there as well. But if you have something that helps solve problems for Australian and Australian accountants and bookies and BAS agents, then yeah, please reach out. I think what's most important is come to us with your customer stories, with those experiences of how your app is changing the way that they're doing certain functions in their office. And that's going to fast track things because if your customers are telling us great things about your product, then that allows us just to move much more quickly, build that case and get things moving. So that deep customer empathy, that I think is critical. It's one thing to in a whiteboard room and build an app that solves a problem. It's another thing to show the customer experience and the before and after, the from and to side of the equation. So that would be my couple of pieces of advice.
And I think what you've said there is really, really important. And I think potentially from the last decade of working with apps, sometimes the mindsets for breaking down and getting into the empathy may not be within the people who are building the solution, and they might need to engage other people or talk with other people, but engage other people to help them with that process, because the empathy, the customer stories, listening to the customers is so important. And I had a meeting with a group of people just the other day, and they came out going, oh, we didn't actually expect to get so much great feedback from this. You've actually changed our minds in how this is operating. We thought, we knew what was happening. And we're like going, but we were here. You could have talked to us. So many accountants and bookkeepers are willing and able to beta test and be part of the conversation.
And I remember even at Receipt Bank when we had the video recording and we were watching what the accountant was doing, and you could hear the voiceover with the accountant and who was running the session, and almost there was almost the engineers were like, well, that's not how we built it. And I'm like, well, it doesn't matter how you built it. It's how our customers are using it. So we've got to bridge this gap of how our customers use it and what their intuition is and what you had in what your initial intention was. And that actually was I think a really important light bulb moment for product engineers and customers coming together much more closely. And I think ever since then, there was much more focus on building for the customer and understanding the customer. And I agree with you. I think accountants and bookkeepers are so willing to. I'm always blown away by how giving the community is, particularly in their willingness to kick the tires, whether it's ideas, whether it's prototypes, whether it's beta tests, alpha tests. I'm blown away by the accountant and bookkeeping community's willingness to dig in and break things, and provide us with really quite candid feedback. So yes, I would encourage apps to embrace that type of mentality. Bit of a blow to the ego the first time, but that's what's most important, is building what customers need and what customers will use.
Many of the successful companies need to go on that journey to hear and embrace and sort of push forward. So yes, I agree. Blow to ego, find a way, maybe get that other people involved to soften it for you. So Damien, talk to me about your podcast strategy and the virtual controller with Penny Breslin. Now, so for those of you listening in, Penny is the CEO of MoneyPenny, an outsourcing onshore, offshore for professionals. And Penny and I are in accounting salon together.
Yes, I got that picture from. Where were you? Were you in New Orleans, or where were you?
I was in this bizarre place called Seaside, Florida, which is where which is where the Truman Show was filmed. And
Oh,
it had not changed since the Truman Show.
since the Truman Show.
It literally had not changed. It was exactly like that. People were cycling around in bicycles. There was rules everywhere, and it was beautiful. It was pristinely beautiful. And the house that Jim Carrey lived in was beside where that photo was taken.
All right. Okay. Brilliant. Yeah. So strategy in the virtual controller. So yeah, I've known Penny Breslin for 20 years or so,
My
and
goodness.
she was one of the first QuickBooks trainers. She knows workflow inside out, and so we actually ran programs together. Where we were talking to accountants about tech stacks, about building this client accounting services or bookkeeping capability, but leveraging technology. So we ran workshops on that, and Xero and QBO and Bill.com and a lot of US apps would come in, Receipt Bank, when they were there. And basically, we've known each other for a very long time, and the entire time she's also had she's a partner in an accounting firm that sits in Chennai, India. And at that, they do the work for US accounting firms, US and Canadian accounting firms. And actually, what's happened is her and her two female partners have built the largest female owned and operated accounting firm in India. So all females. I think they're actually literally just bringing in their first male to help with an IT consulting type division, but 90 odd Indian female accountants, bookkeepers, chartered accountants, CPAs, doing the client accounting services, the tax, the compliance work for US accounting firms. So that's who Penny is, and basically we get together every 2 weeks to sort of talk about the different challenges that we see in accounting firms, the different conversations that we're having with firms that are trying to be more intentional about their business. So the name Strategy in the Virtual Controller comes from the David Maister book, Strategy in the Fat Smoker. And the idea is, Strategy in the Fat Smoker is, he knew that he had to quit smoking. He knew that he had to change his diet, but he wasn't able to do it until he actually acted with quite significant intention, put very small goals and milestones in place. And it's the same thing with this idea of client accounting services and building advisory. Everyone wants to do it. Everyone tells you you've got to do it, but our podcast is designed to help listeners be a bit more intentional. And what are the small stepping stones towards it that can help them build that business that they intended to way back when. We also wrote a book. It's not just the numbers, and so the podcast sort of came out of that book as we talk through the different chapters and the different case studies within the book. And it's just, I think we're coming up to our 100th episode now. So it's in many respects, it's actually just great to see Penny every 2 weeks and sit down and chat and talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of what's happening in our own businesses.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And I do encourage our listeners to jump over and subscribe to it. And it's wonderful that we can have podcasts and just have these amazing conversations and then sort of share them out to the community. I know that sometimes conferences, the late night conferences and the corridor conversations, you're like, oh, this is so good. I wish I could share it with people. And thus through podcasting, we are able to share it with people. So Damien, thank you so much for joining me on the Accounting Apps podcast. I've actually learned so much about so many different areas. What's anything else that you would like to share with the community, and how should people get in contact with you?
I think first and foremost, Heather, thank you so much for having me. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Wonderful to see you, and look forward to seeing you IRL in the coming weeks or months. I think people best contact me through LinkedIn. So there's only one Damien Greathead on LinkedIn, which is good. You can also email me, Damien_Greathead@intuit.com. LinkedIn is probably the best way. I think what would I like listeners to walk away with? I will do a shameless plug for Intuit. I've been thoroughly impressed by the innovation that we're bringing to the market, and I would just encourage listeners to rethink QuickBooks and have another look at it. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by the capabilities we've built. We're not everything. We're not everything to everyone by any means, but there's a certain segment of accountants and bookkeepers and small, medium-sized businesses that we do a very good job for. And I think your listeners will be pleasantly surprised by that.
Absolutely. And look, I will throw in there that competition is good, and all the solutions that are available to us improve by the competition around them. And everyone is pushing each other ahead. So competition is good, and being aware of what's available is a good thing for our community and for our small businesses. Thank you so much, Damien.
Absolute pleasure, Heather. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Accounting Apps podcast. I encourage you to hit the subscribe button right now so you never miss an episode. I encourage you to jump over, find the Accounting Apps newsletter and subscribe to that, and also to join the Accounting Apps community to continue the conversation on accounting app technology. I am Heather Smith, your host, and you can connect with me on all social media platforms, Heather Smith AU. Thank you.